Here we are again with another episode of On Point. It's been a while, holidays and all of those things, but my interest was piqued with my latest guest, which is Nuraz from a really interesting company called iMS, who I've started to work with. But there was so much more to this man. We both share a love of watches and cars, and but I'm really keen to explore what else is happening, obviously outside of what we do with obviously with the people want to hear about the iMS and the whole transformational digital piece that you're doing. But give us a little intro just to pique the appetite of the audience here.
Absolutely. Well, pleasure. Thank you for having me, Rod. Insights into iMS Technologies. We started in 2016. It was a consultancy company providing services into the NHS. But prior to that, if we revert it back to earlier on in my career, I come from a project management background, delivered various different projects in the NHS. Started off as a project support officer, but I was very ambitious. I was always really ambitious. I was always very driven. I kind of realized that earlier on in my career because even before project management, I was involved with football. Okay. And as you can imagine, football is a very competitive sector. And it's a passion of mine as well, so I still follow football now. I'm a Red United fan. Things aren't great at the minute.
Yeah.
However, started off early inspiration, obviously parents, but then I developed this passion for football, real love for football, I think, as early as I can remember, playing football on the streets. At the age of 13, 14, got picked up by Oldham Athletic, was in their soccer schools, did quite well, did very well, moved on to Sheffield United, and then signed professional terms. 4 years down the line, unfortunately due to injury, I had to pivot my career into thinking something else. What is it that I'm going to do with my career? But what I quickly realised is my drive came from that. So I was hoping some of the things I've actually learnt whilst playing football, whilst also being coached by some of the top football coaches in the industry, without naming them, I picked up a lot of things which I took on to my career. So then when I had to pivot my career, it was a case of what do I do next? You weigh your options up, and I looked at, I was fortunate enough to be given an opportunity in Oldham, CCG, as a project support officer. Started to build my career, went into project management, program management, senior program, and then ultimately leading transformations within the NHS and public sector. Whilst I was doing that, I was working with private sector organisations in regards to how they can possibly provide their service provisions into the NHS. That's when I saw an opportunity. I thought, hold on, if I take myself out of the system, would my services still be required within the system, which was the case. So we started to develop this consultancy back in 2016, actually, to be accurate. And then it went from there. We took on bigger and bigger projects within the public sector and private sector. And it was all around transformation. Not necessarily specifically digital transformation initially. It was more around transformation itself, which is target operating models, desired state, or transforming service provisions into performing better and getting the most out of workforce. Sometimes it's even consolidating services, merging organizations together so they can operate as one entity. Those are the transformations we were taking on. And one led to another. We quickly realized that as part of any transformation, it's all about the people, processes, and technology. People to have in place to put processes in place to be followed to make things efficient, and technology to enhance the human attribute in terms of how they manage these processes. So we grew the consultancy, and then in 2018 we identified an opportunity, because everywhere we went and delivered transformations, there was always this big issue where no one had visibility of what was actually really happening within the organization. Because every organization was talking about tech and going digital and going paper free or paper light or reducing admin. And we were always recommending certain technology solutions, but that wasn't the way forward and it wasn't sustainable. So we started to develop iMS systems, and that's when we started to do some R&D, work with clients, feedback, and start to populate our user stories in terms of how our system can be looking and can be built, which can then provide real value to the customers that we're working with. And that was the initial thinking. But then from that, we realized that they were always having to be regulated and audited or inspected, just to look at how their practices are, what their processes and policies are. So we started to build in, as part of the business operations, we started to build in the compliance aspects as well, so then they can demonstrate those. So one led to another. Fast Track 2020, we launched the actual product. Fast Track to 2022, we now have international clients.
Yeah.
That's just to keep it concise in terms of journey.
Yeah, I mean, and that's obviously when you dig into that, I mean, what I'm seeing with you is, number one, you love what you do. You know, like I didn't know about the football thing, and there's often a theme. You know, like people that are passionate or competitive have some kind of sports background that I've come across. I wish I could claim that myself, although I did play rugby at a reasonable level at some point. So what is it, you know, like now in your sort of like format at the moment, what is it that you love about it?
I think there's a few things, because if you go back to my footballing days, I had a real passion for playing football. I used to really enjoy it. And what I realized is when I had to pivot my career, I went from job to job. It's not just a case of I went straight into project support. So I went into sales. Again, it developed my skills even further. I went into call center inbound, similar thing, providing customer services. Yeah. So picked up a number of things from various different organizations and various different jobs, which ultimately kind of led me to where I am. But then I found this passion, similar to what I had when I was younger for football. This passion and satisfaction in terms of when I've delivered a specific project and I see the value is actually brought to the department or the organization itself. That gave me kind of a release of endorphins, certainly made me feel good. So that's when I quickly realized, actually, you know, that is my passion, to be able to support organizations or even turn organizations around in terms of the way they're actually operating, improve efficiencies, reduce administrative responsibilities. Because sometimes what I've seen is with the added responsibilities and the weight and pressures of the day-to-day responsibilities as well, sometimes that can have an impact on the culture as well as the staff and the morale and mentality. If we're able to contribute towards that, then I think we've done a fantastic job. And that's the satisfaction I actually get with our consultancy, because we know if we're just providing our professional services, which is the consultancy, we know the output is going to be a very positive one, because ultimately the customer will be in a far better position than initially when we went in, at least from a process perspective, more efficient and effective. And from a technology perspective, we already know the value it's going to bring. We've already seen the impact it's actually brought to various different organisations and industries.
Because it's quite a dry subject, you know. Like
it is, yeah.
Compliance is, you know, like fills a lot of people with dread.
Yeah.
You know, because it's burdensome. You know, like back in the old days, you know, with ISO, you know, it's filling in forms and lots of evidence and stuff like that. And certainly my experience of, you know, like starting to use this sort of new tech is it speeds up efficiency and, you know, with dashboards, you can very quickly, you know, any business leader needs to know the numbers really quickly because they move quite fast. What have you seen as sort of, you know, like you looking forward? Because obviously, when you stand at a certain point, you're probably, you know, in developing this sort of technology, you usually ahead. What can you see as sort of some of the potential for this stuff going forward?
I think when you look at the industry now, the industry has not changed. It doesn't really matter what you're regulated by, whether it's the financial services, whether it's CQC specifically for healthcare, or ISO standards to demonstrate best practices to interested parties. When you look at how things are done currently, how organizations are getting inspected, how organizations are getting audited. It's a very manual intensive process, which is quite difficult. We've gone through the process ourselves, and we know how challenging it is just to coordinate the actual audits, which is to get the relevant individuals in front of the actual auditor. And also trying to prepare for an audit is quite challenging. Sometimes it's weekends. Even in the education sector, they're having to be regulated by AQA as well as Ofsted. And under assumption, and having spoken to a few individuals who are in the sector, I've also got a family member that actually operates in that sector. Sometimes they're operating over the weekend just before an inspection. It shouldn't be the case. It should be a case of actually we're quite happy with the way we actually operate, with our policies, with our procedures, and have that assurance. Leaders within organisations and directors within organisations need that assurance. It shouldn't be a case of just before audits, we're going to prepare for audits 3 weeks prior, update all our policies, and then be at maximum capacity when it comes to resources just to ensure continuity with the actual compliance and ensure that we can continue to be certified. So we're able to demonstrate that. So when you look at that, it's not authentic. It's not authentic. A business is actually just preparing 3 weeks prior, because that's not what they actually practice. And when you look at these certification bodies or regulatory bodies, what they're looking for is how do you practice your operations? How do you deliver your services or service provisions? What policies do you have in place or controls you have in place? And they're not being practiced as part of business operations. So you've got your compliance operating in its own silo. Then you've got business operating separately as well. And it's not very sustainable when you look at it. So the way it's sustainable is if you merge the two together, is your business practices in line with what the regulatory requirements are, or in line with what your compliance standards are in terms of what you've introduced within the business and your management systems. These management systems have been designed to actually help businesses operate better in terms of industry practice. So these compliance standards have been designed by top-end professionals who have come together to design these frameworks. And it's all to help the businesses. And I think sometimes organizations actually think we're going to be regulated. Yes, absolutely, it's going to benefit the business because it gives that stamp proof. It also provides that competitive edge when it comes to ISO standards. And in other sectors, for example, in the education sector or the financial services sector, if you're not regulated, if you don't comply, you can no longer provide your services. Right?
I mean, you something you touched on there, because I know you at the beginning you said you're now international. I mean, for a company, you know, like who's looking at taking this on, what are some of the opportunities? You know, where can we compete? We're now at the EU and stuff like that. Is there, by having something like these systems and the portal and the apps, do you think that will actually bring more competitive? Does that make it more easier to be represented internationally? You know, what are you seeing some of the opportunities there?
I think it's also demonstrating to not only giving yourself and the directors that assurance, but also demonstrating to any interested parties, and that could be potential external or international partners, in terms of your evidence via or through a portal. What better? You're not having to share information or practices or processes that you're going to follow. You don't have to share a certification in terms of these are the standards we are actually certified by. You can just grant them access to a portal for a limited time, so then they can actually see your practices in hand and see how authentic you are as a business and how you run the business as well. And I think the opportunity is, if you're able to demonstrate and evidence robust operations in terms of workflows and how you operate, more chances are businesses would want to work with you because of the transparency. And then secondly, businesses would want to work with you because the way you're actually operating, not many within the sector are operating in that manner. And it certainly does give you that competitive edge, absolutely.
And you know, if you're, you know, as a business going forward, where do you think is the biggest sort of transformational piece? You know, like if you're, you know, like you're obviously evolving all the time, and you're seeing other businesses on a sort of bigger scale, because obviously I know you're tied in with BM Charter, which I think they've probably got 10,000
Yeah,
businesses themselves.
yeah.
So what sort of where do you see the biggest transformation for us for an SME by doing this? You know, that they're thinking, okay, I've got this compliance burden, I now have to bring in my whole organisation to. But where do you see? Is there something new that because I know you've got developers, you've got software engineers, and they've got new technology, and I think you mentioned to me, it was an interesting story about your the fishing thing. So maybe give some inspirational.
Yeah, I think if you look at it as a whole, so when you're an SME, one of the core fundamentals, if you take, for example, building a high rise, 25-story building, the basics you need is a solid foundation. When they built Burj Khalifa, they built it on sand, right? What they needed to do was have solid foundations, so they dug in, I think 150 meters, to put in the solid foundations, which then enabled them to build the tallest building in the world.
Yeah.
And that's exactly your foundation.
Right.
So as an SME, it will allow you to grow, scale your business even further, give you the credibility to actually grow, and acquire more customers, acquire more partners. Because when you look at business as a whole, when you get into any forms of partnership or any collaborative work with an organization to deliver a specific project or a specific tender, for example, you want to be assured that the partners you're actually working with have robust operations and credibility. In order for you to build that, you need the foundations. Something like iMS systems will give you that. Something like certain compliance standards will also give you that, as well as give you that credibility. So in order for you to grow out of that and go into a medium-sized enterprise to a large enterprise and a corporate, you need the foundations. Otherwise, what will happen is, as you scale and grow, you'll come across challenges. The rate you scale and grow will be reduced drastically as well if you don't have the foundations, because you'll constantly come across blockers and issues, and you're constantly firefighting to keep the business afloat, let alone scale and grow. Whereas if you set the foundations with the technology, as well as your governance, operations and compliance and practices, it enables you to grow and add to your departments, your staff, who can then come into the actual business and follow these processes and procedures that have been put in place. And this gives you the foundation to be able to really build your empire and scale your business. Without that, it's very difficult and challenging for any business to scale and grow.
No, sound advice. So that's I can see the project management and the consultancy all layering into one.
I mean, because when we set up the actual consultancy, there was a ultimate aim and drive and objective. Obviously, we've got business objectives, which is we want to be as big as we possibly can. But ultimately, we actually want to be the ones that actually change the compliance industry and change the way businesses also manage their compliance and incorporate their compliance into their business and business as usual, in other essence. And I think we are going to disrupt that market and change that market. And we're not going to do it ourselves. We're going to work with relevant partners. We're going to work with relevant individuals to get us to that stage. But as a business leader, I want to be able to be in a position where I'm able to give back to what we've been able to build. Because being a business leader, similar to yourself, Rod, we're in a very fortunate position. And we all have ambitions, we all have goals. My ambition is certainly to build a very successful business which has definitely disrupted the market, but the ultimate objective my personal objective is to accumulate quite a substantial amount of wealth, which I can then distribute to the people who really need it and those who really need it. So we also set up a foundation.
Okay.
All the revenues we generate, we put a set amount into the actual foundation on a monthly basis. And
what's the foundation? Tell us about that.
So it's a foundation, my own foundation, which is linked to the actual business. So we've started a couple of projects. We've actually finished a project not long ago. working in Uganda ourselves, building a community borehole well which will last over 100 years, giving them fresh spring water. And then we've got planning permissions to build a school there. And the objective is to build a school there to provide basic education to the children in the village. Because we look at sustainability, right? Anything we do, we have to make sure that there's a continuity, there's a sustainability of it, even when it comes to business. And as you're well aware, with businesses, we have to ensure sustainability.
ESG and the development goals at the moment are so
so we've got planning permission to build a school. We hope to build a school in the next couple of years to provide basic education. But what we realised, even with our company, we've got our developers in Bangladesh, for example, and also working all over the UK. They're working remotely. They can still deliver services. Why can't they deliver services from Uganda or anywhere else in the world? So if we're able to build a school, provide basic education as well as digital skills, who knows, we might be employing people from Uganda and that specific village. That then becomes very sustainable. That village is then thriving and growing then, which is impacting them and their lives.
So you're ticking the ESG box as a business as well.
Absolutely. You have to. But it's not just for us. It's not a tick box exercise. We genuinely want to do it because that's our ambition. We want to be able to be in a position where we can actually deliver projects outside of our work and service provisions, which is contributing towards a better world, in other essence.
Was it hard setting up a foundation?
There's challenges, absolutely. But we went through the process. Luckily, we have good people around us.
You got a big team, have you, too?
Yeah, we've got a decent team that can actually handle paperwork and
compliance.
Compliance, absolutely.
Okay.
And we evidence that. We have to practice what we preach. We definitely, and there's transparency in terms of how we operate.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly. I mean, we're not there yet. It's certainly. I mean, we have charitable things that we support. Different organisations, but it's something that. Eventually we'd like to do our own. When we become the GOAT of the facade industry,
absolutely.
Then it'll be good to have a foundation.
I'm sure that's not far off.
Well, I think who knows, but I think the word disruption is really interesting at the moment. So it's two things that I wanted to touch on. One is does this, whilst you're looking to disrupt the compliance industry, how does SMEs using this, is there an opportunity to disrupt their own industry?
Absolutely.
So, for instance, one thing we talked about this morning was how some of your AI and machine learning technology that sits within the program allows you to bring in communicate API. And one area that I really passionate about is disrupting is O&M's, operation manuals. That's our biggest challenge as a company, and I think our biggest challenge as an industry. And really in the world is we've got a lot of stock. I read some fascinating, it was like 7.5 trillion square metres of real estate, of which 75% of it will be stranded real estate because it won't meet different standards. It's not meeting climate change. And I always feel like, I'm not quite there yet as a sort of climate activist. But it's such an important part, and I just think, well, how could we bring that in? How could we bring discussions about the facade? How could we bring information that's already out there? So if we could access O&M information which is stuck in these sort of siloed different platforms, and then connect it through your Alice, if I can use her name. To just drill out that information and take unstructured data, put it into a structured format, so then we can go, right, okay, let's make some educated information. And I find that really exciting because it's sort of being an activist for good. I don't want to be out there, stapling myself to the floor, or I certainly don't condone breaking glass, even though we benefit from it. However, I think educating the whole market to say, okay, well, look, we have got a climate challenge, we have got information that could give us better information using technology. So it's sort of disruption through technology, which obviously a lot of technology is about disruption. But from a project management point of view, from a consultancy point of view, I'm really starting to get an idea that actually if we had a path that works with sort of the government guidelines and go, right, okay, let's take that and let's take what we already do every single day where we've got teams out changing glass. But, I think I've said it on so many podcasts before, like if you've got London every single day, a building's coming down, a new one's going up and an old one's coming down. And that, you talked about a school in Uganda. You could take that glass and you could build in Uganda. I know it's moving across the world, but there may be something in Uganda, again, which is an old bank which is being disused that could be recreated. So I think it's a connection piece. Somewhere around the world for it to be a sort of central piece, a central organisation, a central bank of a repository of knowledge that says, okay, well, look, here's all the stuff that's going up. Here's all the requirements of the stuff going down. Demolition audits, all syncing up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and I think when you look at that, that's technology is the enabler. If we relied on human resource to be able to coordinate all of that, it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
It requires a lot of human resources, and it's definitely not cost effective. If we're able to build some form of technology which allows human resources to be able to capture information and share information and exchange information, anything's possible.
There was this, I think it was Mo Gawdat in one of his books, Scary Smart, but other people have talked about AI and robots, and everyone got scared. They're thinking well, okay, if the robot's coming in and
absolutely,
what's going to happen to the people? But I think by the people actually reprogramming the robots, feeding the information, it should give us all free time.
Absolutely. And I think being a technology company, one of the most important factors is being ethical. Because when we look at technology, it's so broad. So we're a technology company which enhances the human attribute. And we focus on developing systems and solutions which enable businesses to operate more effectively and efficiently. And that's our ultimate objective. I'm sure there's technology companies out there that are developing chips, robots, AIs. And I think there needs to be some form of compliance even within the technology company industry, which is ethical, just to ensure that everyone's intention is to have a better world and is also contributing towards a better, more sustainable world.
Have you come across that? I mean, like when you've got where we're at in the world at the moment, but you've got stuff being made in China, Taiwan,
it's crazy because there's certain things. I think certain things are publicised, certainly, which they want to publicise. If there was anything unethical, I don't think individuals or companies would certainly be publicising what they're developing. And hence the reason why there's certainly, if technology companies do actually exist, what we need to have, especially with AI and machine learning, because we also use that, and we're building robots, but these are virtual robots, not physical ones that are going to come in and take over the world. So it's not something we're building. We're building virtual robots which exist within servers just to analyze data. And I think there needs to be definitely some form of compliance within the technology industry, just to make sure everything is ethical. And
there's security, and obviously there's one thing drawing all this data in, but where's the security piece in that? Is that what certainty can customers like me get that our data's secure and there's not going to be shared to Facebook or?
Absolutely. One of the key things is having certain infrastructure pieces in place, so alert mechanisms. So if there's any information extracted from your servers, you're alerted immediately.
Right.
If, for example, sometimes companies out there, especially when it comes to bugs and viruses, they can potentially look to penetrate a system by using the credentials up to 17, 18,000 times a minute.
Right.
You know, when we put in the credentials, they type all types of credentials. So as part of security, you certainly need to have a limitation in terms of how often someone can get their passwords or credentials into a portal, limited to maybe 3 or 4 maximum tries. After that, the account automatically blocks. That then stops any robot from penetrating the actual system or having access to the actual system, because sometimes these viruses and bots are actually built just to go and penetrate, and if they don't have limitations, they're constantly trying to actually log into and in terms of what we've built, all it does is it's a bot that stays within our servers, and any integrations with any other systems, it's just if there's a two-way communication of the actual data, that data is coming through in terms of anonymized data, just to provide us data and insights. No information is actually pulled in from any other system that's been integrated. So these systems still operate in their own silos. However, the critical information is just presented on the front end.
Is there blockchain? Is there a blockchain piece to this?
No. Blockchain, I think, is potentially the future in terms of infrastructure and security. Because within blockchain, you can create your own ecosystem, which is anonymized and to the world, for example. You can create wallets. Within those wallets, you can create custodial wallets, similar to what our system does. I think definitely blockchain is the future because fintech is using it. Yeah, it's worked within fintech, and fintech, anything to do with finance is always got to be really robust and secure. Yeah, if it works there, it can work in any other industry.
So do you see development into that area in the future?
Potentially.
Yeah.
Potentially. Absolutely. Okay. In terms of infrastructure, absolutely. Because everything from now, when we look at the technology industry, it was from physical servers on site to having servers on site. Now everything's moving into cloud. What are the benefits? You can access it from anywhere in the world, irrespective of where you are or the time. You don't need to be behind a specific machine or computer to access that. Next step after that will be blockchain, certainly.
Right. And 5 years, 10 years in advance, I mean, you mentioned your guys are, whilst they're working some latency legacy systems that may be 20 years old, but the new technology is 5 years ahead. What can you give? What insights can you give us into that?
Well, when I say the technology is certainly 5 years ahead in terms of how we currently operate. So we're in 2022. If we look at the way we operate, we still use emails to communicate our day-to-day tasks, or sending information, or attachments or documents. I think 5 to 10 years down the line, that would be a thing of the past. Because since email got introduced, it's not changed. And I think the next step is someone's going to come in and completely change that. Who knows, it might be us.
Okay, so it's a sort of a Slack type economy you're thinking.
Yeah, slightly. Yeah, absolutely. It's slightly different because even with Slack and Teams, they're really good to communicate with various different team members across. But it's sometimes difficult for accountability, and even in Jira as well. You can assign tasks, you can have individual as owners, but there's limitations in terms of what you can do. I think the next step is certain things that are going to disrupt the market, which doesn't exist at the minute, which people aren't aware of. Okay. And I think when it comes to Surface, it's going to completely revolutionize in terms of how businesses operate. Okay. Because if you look at businesses adopting multiple systems for multiple purposes, operating in their own silos isn't sustainable. As you grow the business, you're adding different licenses for the same individual, charging 3 different times, for example. Because they might have 3 different roles. So I think in order for businesses and what the future looks like, we need to look at a more sustainable way moving forward. And I think there could be new operating systems in the future.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, Nuraz, it's been insightful, and it's always fascinating to talk to you. And I know we could talk, for a lot of different topics. Is there any sort of last thought you want to convey, or you want to give the audience, or something that might save them money, or something that might improve their life or their business?
I think, yeah, absolutely. When you're, whatever it is you're doing, whether you're a business owner, whether you're a director, whether you're working as a project manager or any other sector or industry, I think the most important factor is we want to be able to sleep well at night. And what I've realised is with certain roles and responsibility comes certain pressures. And the higher up you go, more pressures, more accountability, more responsibility, which sometimes I think across the organisation it's not seen in terms of the actual pressures. And I've personally known quite a number of individuals who failed to cope with the actual pressure. And that's not because they weren't very competent. It's just the fact that they didn't have the infrastructure or the foundations in place to give them that assurance. And I think if there was any message I'd put out to any of the directors, especially around technology and compliance, don't take it lightly. Give yourselves that breathing space and incorporate that within your business. Live and breathe it, and that way you protect yourself as well as the business, continuity and sustainability of your business. And then that gives the foundation for you to scale and grow and achieve not only your personal ambitions, but also fulfill the potential of the business you've actually built.
Yeah, great advice. And I think there's a phrase, as you were saying, is the great Robert Fritz, and he says the structure of the environment dictates the behaviour.
Absolutely.
And I think if you get the structure right, then you'll definitely be sleeping well at night.
Absolutely.
And on that note, I will say, see you on the next episode. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Nuraz.
Cheers.